Hello and welcome to another episode of A Look Into, the railway series started last week with the PLM 242s. Go check that video if you're interested, by the way. I'll put a link in the desk below. Today's episode will look into the 232 U-1, nicknamed La Divine, France's last steam masterpiece. The 232 U-1 is the last steam engine part of a new traction program built by Marc de Casso, a designer who previously worked for the Nord Company and built the infamous 231C or Super Pacifics, among others. It also is the last steam locomotive built for the SNCF and, again, the last locomotive of the U-turn 232s, originally built pre-war for the Nord Company in 1935. These previous locomotives were part of the 232R and S series of 3 and 4 locomotives respectively, with few differences between each other, the S being 4-cylinder compound, while the R were 3-cylinder single expansion. These types have a story on their own, so it's possible they'll both get their own episode once, but to summarize their use, though quite unusual in their looks, they were very good at their job. Back to the 232 U-1, it was at first supposed to be built with an unconventional turbine as propulsion and named the 232R4, being ordered in 1938 at the SACM works in Grafenstaden. The building was indeed stopped during the war and thankfully restarted in 1944 at the French Liberation, though this time the builders decided to get rid of the turbine and installed a 4-cylinder compound engine instead. Finally, the engine was delivered to the SNCF in 1949, so 11 years after its order, and now featuring a new streamlining inspired by Sir Nigel Grizzly's engine in the UK, and a very distinctive white pattern on the sides representing a white swan. This symbolized the end of steam, because contrary to other engineers like Chapelon, de Casso knew the age of steam was over, and he wanted his last engine to show that. The 232R4 became the 232 U1 with the changes made, making her distinct to the older series, both in looks and abilities. The engine weighed 118.7 tons while empty, and was 15.705 meters long without the tender. The heating surface in total was of about 200 square meters, with 137 boiling tubes and 33 smoke tubes, taking superheating elements in them indeed. The boiler itself was rated at about 20 bars, which is quite a lot if I can be honest. The feed water was supplied by 2 thermix injectors in either side of the locomotive, and an additional SCFI pump with a water heater, and the coal was inserted into the firebox with a HT1 type mechanical stoker. The locomotive was powered by a 4-cylinder compound engine, using voltage distribution instead of the unusual ones used on the 232R and S. She also developed 2,900 kilowatts or 4,000 horsepower. The actual usable mass was of only 69 tons on the drivers, which were 2 meters in diameter. With those specs, the planned speed for commercial service was ranging from 160 to 200 km per hour. The locomotive also featured a double exhaust, as is tradition with modern and perfectioned French engines. After the SACM was unable to finish the locomotive before the Germans took the industry over, The building was resumed by the Corpelouvet Works in La Courneuve, after the war indeed, and it's to them that we can credit the modifications making the 232R4 the 232U1. The locomotive was delivered in 1949 to the SNCF, and even though being unique in her design, she was used on the same express lines as the 232R and S, between Paris and Lille mainly. She was housed in the today defunct Dépôt de la Chapelle in Paris, like her 7 other Hudson sisters. Regulations prevented the U-1 to ever reach her supposed top speed of 200 km per hour, as the lines she ran on were limited during her whole life at 140 km per hour. So it's totally possible that the U-1 was actually faster than Mallard. Because of the heavy axle loads on these engines, about 23 tons at the heaviest, a lot of lines were out of bounds for the Hudsons. This prevented them from leaving their original service line and technically shortened their life by quite a bit. The Hudsons and the U-1 had a mostly uneventful life, doing what they were built for without causing too many problems. By 1958 though, the 232R and S started to be taken out of service, and finally in 1961, it was the U-1's turn. This means she had a very short life of only 12 years. With the years passing by, all of her sister was scrapped, but the U-1 survived. She was then restored between 1973 and 1976 at the Thouars workshops, and is now, like so many others, housed in the Cité du Train at Mulhouse. There's a difference though between all of the saved locomotives and the U-1. She can actually stretch her legs multiple times a day, being placed on an electric system permitting her wheels to spin for the public. There's a downside to this idea though, as the rods and mechanical parts really show their age, cracking and squeaking as they move, and the lack of real heavy maintenance probably doesn't help at all. It is nice to know though that such an engineering masterpiece is still visible to the public today, and not scrapped like so many others. And that's all for today. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this episode, and check the first one if you're new to the channel. See you next time!